Good to go. Okay. Firstly, good evening, everybody. We're learning a chapter today, which is it's one of the saddest chapters in the in Sefer Shmuel, because, and I'm reminded so much of what we've had to go through in the last essentially 2.5 years. So many of the terrible levias, terrible funerals that have taken place. Much of the discussion is about friendship. There is I just heard I don't know what it was, a shiur or maybe a podcast. It was Doron Peretz, who's now the head of the WZO, talking about the fact that his son was the best friend to everyone in the unit, which is so sad. And the way he spoke about it, he really speaks about it remarkably bravely. And I don't know him personally. I'm sure, imagine a lot of you do. But this idea of the friendship, which sort of gets abruptly destroyed by these terrible events that have happened, and to me, the paradigm of all this is coming from this incredible friendship that we read about in the story of David and Yonatan. I just want to dedicate the learning to in memory of my father. It was his Yosai today, 12 years since he passed away, and again, very, very unique person, very special individual. So much of what we're learning about the midot of David, I really felt he embodied in his own way. And there's going to be something here this evening as well, which I think is very much something I remember him for. So without further ado, let's get into chapter 20. It's a long chapter, and I want to try and get through the whole chapter. Chapter 20. Shmuel Aleph Perek Chaf, and it is unbelievable. And we've got one basic question, which I'm going to sort of let simmer over the whole chapter, and if we have time at the end, we'll come back and deal with it. The question, the pasuk goes like this, chapter 20. David, remember David was running away, and we explained that David became the paradigm for the future of the Jewish people, going into Galut, having to pick up and run at a moment's notice. So many people talk about that experience. Remember, he was in a place called Nayot, and he met up with Shmuel, and what they did over there, they seemingly, according to rabbinic tradition, they were discussing the Beit HaMikdash. We spoke about this last time. So he comes back to Yonatan, and he says to Yonatan, he's complaining. What did I do? What's my sin? What's my iniquity? Before your father. He wants to kill me. The question is the very fundamental question. What is David thinking by going back to Yonatan? Yonatan's in the palace. Who's going to turn up within any given amount of time? The king, right? Yonatan's in the palace, presuming his father's going to come home, right? And where did David run to after this whole story of running away from the soldiers and climbing down with the rope and the whole thing? He's gone back to Yonatan, who's presumably in the palace. So what is possessing David to put himself in such danger to go and speak to Yonatan? Now, I know he wants to say goodbye to Yonatan. He wants to, not at this point, not say goodbye. He wants to clarify things with Yonatan. But there's got to be something going on here, that there's a quality of David which is really remarkable. As I've mentioned a number of times, the book that inspired me, or the books on this section of the book of Shmuel, is that stuff written by someone called Yeshua Bachrach. Yeshua Bachrach was a wonderful teacher at the Michlala in Yerushalayim, various other institutions. He also taught in schools around Jerusalem. Funny, when I spoke at YU a number of years ago, a lot of the ladies afterwards came up to me and said, "Oh, he was my teacher at Michlala in 1982 or 1979 or wherever it was." So he was certainly very well remembered by many of the women who live in New York today and went to Michlala in the early days. And it's certainly something which his books are phenomenal. He's literally written one whole book, 200 pages, just on this chapter 20. It's remarkable. And no way I can do it justice by even refer. Well, I've got one reference to it, but I can't do more than that because it's just overwhelming. It'll never become Art Scroll because it's just a little bit out of the box for Art Scroll. It's not quite, they can't doctor it enough to make it kosher enough for them. But that's their issue. The book is wonderful. Yeshua Bachrach was a very wonderful teacher. Anyway, that Art Scroll comment I deny hotly now. Pasuk Bet. It's on tape, so it's good. I stand by what I believe. If you want to hear something even better than that, you have to listen to JJ Schachter talk about Art Scroll occasionally. He's really got something to say. Anyway, chapter 20, verse 2. So he's gone back to Yonatan. Yonatan, tell me what's going on. What's up? Bet. Yonatan is shocked. He doesn't know any of this background, or he knows that his father's going through depression. That he does know. But this whole sense that David has of being petrified that Shaul is intending to kill him, this for Yonatan becomes a very, very big shock. It becomes a very big problem. And he says, God forbid, lo tamut, you're not going to die. Hinei lo yaseh avi, lo in is actually written, read with a vav, written with a vav, read with an aleph. Lo here is written as not, negative. Lo yaseh avi davar gadol davar katan. My father Katon is not going to do anything big or small. But lo yiglet dozni, without telling me, literally revealing it to my ear. Umadua yastir avi mimeni atadavar ze ein zot. Right, and you're telling me he wants to kill you, right? That's ein zot. It can't be true. So as far as Yonatan is concerned, and he has this incredible dilemma. He's absolutely loyal to David, and he's even more loyal to his father. And this becomes so challenging. This is the ultimate test of loyalty. Where do I put my, which basket do I place my eggs? Is it in the basket of Yonatan, in the basket of David, or in the relationship with my father, which to him is absolutely sacrosanct? And this becomes eventually a terrible, terrible dilemma for Yonatan, and he goes with his father, even though he realizes by definition that will end the relationship with David. It's so sad. But he makes that commitment. So again, Yonatan, an unbelievable guy who is not well known, certainly not as well known as David. Listen to this, Gimel. David made another oath. And he's trying to get the message across to Yonatan. He says, your father surely knows that I found favor in your eyes. We're friends. And he said, do not make this known to Yonatan, because he will be sad. In other words, if David is saying to Yonatan, if Shaul would make it known to you what he intends to do to me, you'll become very sad because you're my friend. So he says this is now something which you're not necessarily going to know about. But I'm telling you, and I'm saying in expression of an oath, which is so strict, ki kapesha beini ubein hamavet, or kapesa with a sin. Pesa is normally spelled in modern Hebrew psia with a samach, but it's the same word, same meaning. It says footstep. I'm literally one step away from death. I am literally on the verge of being killed. And you should know this, Yonatan. And vayome Yonatan al David. So Yonatan said, I still can't believe it, says Yonatan. And you hear the terrible emotion that's going on here between the two. He says, Ma toma nafshecha ve'esela. Listen, whatever your soul tells you, I will do for you. Ask me whatever you need, whatever you want. He's still processing the whole word that David said to him about his father. But in the meantime, he says, what can I do for you, David? David, what can I do for you? Vayomer David Yonatan, verse 5, Hine chodesh macha. In other words, David wants Yonatan to be absolutely 100% sure of the situation. So how are we going to bring it about? So he says, listen, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. Now we all know, in fact, this is the Haftarah of what is called Mocha Chodesh. I think we're going to read it in a few weeks' time before Chodesh Sivan. It's going to Rosh Chodesh is Sunday, and we're going to read this on the Shabbat, if I'm not mistaken. The Mocha Chodesh bit actually is later, but it's already alluded to here because Rosh Chodesh, just to sort of a background bit of information, was a big holiday. The king used to have a big Suda. Whether the Rebbes do in Borough Park, I don't know, or even in Bnei Brak, but I'm sure they do something for Rosh Chodesh. But once upon a time, not only there was a tradition, women did not work on Rosh Chodesh, okay, which is interesting that it was referred to the ladies. And on top of that, there seems to have been situation where maybe men did not work either. They took it was more of a day. It was a bit like Chol Hamoed. That's what I compare it to. So listen to this. David says to Yonatan, "Hinei chodesh machar, tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. V'anochi yoshev v'yeshev im hamela lechol." Normally I turn up for the special meal that we have, the tish that we have. V'shilachtani v'nistati basadeh. But this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and hide in the field. Ad Erev Shlishi, I'm going to be there for 2 days. I'm not going to turn up for the meal on the first day Rosh Chodesh, and I'm not going to turn up for the meal on the second day Rosh Chodesh. He already knew that it was going to be 2 days Rosh Chodesh, and that's all to do with the sighting of the moon, etc. And the third day, this is when it's all going to become clarified. But what's going to happen? Pasuk Vav, unbelievable story. In Pakod Yifkadeni Avicha, if your father takes notice that I'm not there, Marta, and you will say, Nishal mimeni David, Larutz beit lechem miro. You're going to give an excuse, which is a big irony because this is the same excuse that Shmuel gave when he said, Shaul will kill me if I go and anoint David. If you remember that story, Shmuel made a little, what we call a white lie. He didn't want to tell the truth, so he says, I'm going to do a korban. And this is exactly the same excuse which now David is telling Yonatan to tell his father why David didn't come to the Suda. It's kind of an interesting parallel going on here. So he says to him, listen, if you tell to your father that I've gone to Beit Lechem, it's like a family day of sacrifice. Their personal Thanksgiving day. Right? Not having turkey, but they're having whatever they're having instead. Zayin. If your father says everything's fine, in other words, he's got a good excuse, David, then everything's fine. I don't have to worry. Shalom lavdecha, everything will be peaceful. But if he's going to get angry, this is it. This is the sign that he wants to do me evil, right? Because he has got absolutely angry beyond belief about this excuse that you made. And it's an unbelievable story. And again, why has David come back to the palace? This is brewing here a situation where Shaul walks in. He's got his handy spear. Remember, he's always carrying his spear. Next thing you know, that's it. David is perforated forever, and he's gone. It's very, very, very dangerous situation. However, Vasita chesed al avdecha ki bivrit Hashem heveta et avdecha imo. What David is saying that we have a covenant, and you will honor the kindness which you've done to me. And this makes me cry. David says, if I've done anything wrong, hamiteni ata, then you put me to death. You take the law into your own hands. You're the son of the king. Obviously, your father might be considering me as a rebel, and the rebel of the king is someone who is not allowed to live. He's put to death. And I want you to do it instead of your father. Why bring me to your father? Unbelievable. You can imagine the tears that are flowing at this point when David is saying to Yonatan, you do it. You raise the sword and you kill me. Yonatan, all I can say is he keeps it together. I don't know how. But Yonatan Chalila, he said, God forbid. Because if I surely know that my father wants to do you evil, I won't tell you. In other words, no way am I going to become the executioner. I'm definitely not going to do that. And if there is anything to tell you, I will tell you. Wow. Obviously Yonatan is beginning to understand how serious it really is. So David says to Yonatan, Mi agid li, mi oma yancha avicha kasha. How are you actually going to get the message to me? Because at the end of the day, if you're with your father, how are you going to tell me what your father's reaction was when you tell him this whole bubamaisa, that I've gone to do a korban? How are you going to get the message to me? And this is where the story becomes so powerful. David, look, come with me. We're going to take a little walk out into the field. They both went out. In other words, wolves have ears. If I have a discussion with you in the palace, who knows who's going to be overhearing? The door is not closed properly. Who knows what's going to be? Come with me, and we're going to discuss this outside. Unbelievable story. Pasuk Yud Bet. Yonatan definitely is a smart guy. Vayome Yonatan al David. So again, now he speaks to David again. He says, Hashem Elokei Yisrael ki echkor et avi ke'eit machash lishi. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask my father a question. And based on his reaction, based on what he says, by the time we get to the third day, and I know, David, you're hiding out here in the field till that moment, V'hinei tov el David, if it's good, then I'll let you know. Ki ko yaseh Hashem le'onatan v'ko yosef. May God continue to do for me, and so may He continue. Ki yetiv el avi et hara alecha. That instead of evil coming from my father, it will be good. V'galiti et aznecha. I will let you know. V'shilachticha v'alachta l'shalom, and you'll be able to go away in peace. V'yihi Hashem imach kasher yom. Right. In other words, this is the other side of the coin. If it turns out that my father, in fact, wants to do evil, then I will be able to get a message to you that you'll be able to run away and you will not be damaged or killed by my father. Yudalat. But he says, if I'm still alive, in other words, in the end of the day, I don't know what's going to be. Maybe my father will become angry with me, and I may not survive this whole situation. So I want to make sure that if I am still around, you will honor the kindness that you promised to do for me, and I will not die. In other words, basically, you'll see Yonatan is going to make David, not only is there a covenant between David and Yonatan, but it's also between Yonatan and David. Yonatan wants David to honor any of the promises which he is going to make or has made to Yonatan, particularly in terms of the family. We know in the end Yonatan dies a hero's death, and there is a grandson called Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is very limited in terms of his ability. He can't walk, and he's very obviously challenged in so many ways. And what happens is that David promises to look after Mephibosheth. So Yonatan wants to make sure that whatever comes out of this event, which we're now living through, at least the promise that David has made, a covenant that he made with Yonatan, will be honored in the future. And you'll see that this becomes a very big deal. Later on, we'll see exactly how it plays out, because it really does play out. Pasuk Tedva, V'lo tachrid et chastecha mi'im beiti ad olam. Do not discontinue, as he says here in the translation, your kindness from me. Lo bachrit Hashem et oivei David. Even when your enemies are destroyed by God, ish me'al pnei adama. In other words, if you come out on top and you survive this, then I want you to promise that you will honor whatever you promised to me you'll be honored in the future. Yonatan in Beit David. Not only did Yonatan make a covenant with David, with the house of David, meaning in the future, anything that's going to come out of David, Yonatan has made a covenant that the future house of David will look after the house of Yonatan. It's so moving. Ubikesh Hashem miyad oivei David, and the Lord will seek this from. Some say this is a euphemism, means from the hand of David. David might be considered an enemy, but he really is not an enemy. But this is the language, sometimes euphemistic language, that we find it in Talmud, we find it in the Bible as well. And basically what Yonatan is saying is that in this covenant, I want you to honor what you promise. Pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayosef Yonatan lashpia David ba'avoto, and he made him promise, made him make an oath in his feelings towards him, the love towards him, ki avad nafsho evo, because he loved him as a soulmate, right? And this again is something which we spoke about before. This relationship is a spiritual relationship. Rabbi talks about it, and he says that sometimes two people it's like in yeshiva, you have the experience of learning with someone who becomes a lifelong friend. I mean, it can happen, as I said, in the army. It happens in different circumstances, different situations. And David and Yonatan became so close that it became as if, they were almost as if they were brothers, almost as if you could argue, almost like twins. They had this sense of closeness, this ahavat nefesh. It's about the soul. They had the same aspiration. V'ahavta l'recha, I read it last week in the parsha, that they each wanted the success for the other one even more than their own success. This is one of the explanations. The Ramban, I think, says this on the Torah. He says with David and Yonatan that Yonatan wanted for David more than he would actually get for his own future, he wanted even more for David. And David wanted the same for Yonatan. They were so in tune and so connected. It's really something very, very special. As I said at the beginning, these kind of friendships, this is the paradigm of a very deep friendship, and something which the Bible stresses in such a beautiful way. But it's going to be a tragic situation. We know tragedy is coming. This is where the Haftarah begins on Mocha Chodesh. So Yonatan says, right, tomorrow, Rosh Chodesh, you're not going to be there. Right? We've agreed, you're not turning up. And then you're going to go away for this 3-day period essentially to the beginning of the third day. Said the place where you're hiding, you're going to go there from today, which is work day, and tomorrow Rosh Chodesh, 2 days is not going to be a work day. So you're going to go to this hiding place on the work day. And you're going to go to this special stone, some sort of marker, whatever it was, and you're going to hide there. You're going to stay there for those couple of days. He's going on a camping trip. And Yonatan says, I'm going to take 3 arrows, and I'm going to shoot them in after the second day Rosh Chodesh. I'm going to go out and practice archery. Obviously, this is something that maybe the kings used to do even in those days. Today, it's shooting, sort of birds, and I don't know what the aristocracy in England get up to. They usually do this away from the crowd, shooting the grouse season, whatever grouse are. And again, he says, I will shoot the arrow, tzida ore, and I will shoot it towards the side when I am practicing this shooting. The shalach li matara, to aim at a target. What the rabbis all say is, why would not Yonatan not try and get a message to David, mouth to mouth, to give him a verbal message? And they say something beautiful here, because Yonatan knows in his heart of hearts this is not going to be a good situation, and he doesn't want to talk bad about his father. He doesn't want to say, my father wants to kill you. So what he does, he sets up this seemingly elaborate messaging system whereby the arrows will be fired in such a way. He knows where David is hiding. If the arrows go over David's head and beyond David, then that's a sign that David's got to run away. If the arrows land before David, then that's a sign that David can stay where he is and everything is fine. And he wants to do it in such a way. The 3 arrows represent 3 days. You can get into all the different representations, what the number 3 is. The reality is, Yonatan does not want to say to David, my father wants to kill you. Certainly not at this point. He just wants to do it in a roundabout way, because, to be perfectly honest, it's very painful to have to express it in a direct way. And this is the whole thing with the arrows. I remember speaking at my grandson's bar mitzvah. He also had this haftarah, the haftarah Mocha Chodesh, and I said, the arrows represent aiming for the sky. You aim as high as possible. This is what David and Yonatan were about. They were shooting. David was looking for the arrows to be shot by Yonatan, because it was a symbol that Yonatan was saying to David, we always have to aim for the stars. If you aim for 100 and you get to 50, that's at least you've got to 50. If you only aim for 50 and you compromise your situation, then if you get to 10%, that's what you will achieve. You always got to aim above and beyond where you feel you can aim for. In other words, you always go for the highest, for the biggest target, for the greatest achievement. So that, again, I think was a good message for a bar mitzvah boy. Even if he does, maybe he remembers it, I don't know, I'll have to ask him once. Kafala. Now listen to what happens. What will happen is, I will have my trusty servant, a lad, with me, and I will send him and tell him to find the arrow. And you'll hear the instruction. If I tell the lad, the arrows are beyond you, in other words, if the arrows, meaning they've landed between you and me, before where you're hiding, it's in the foreground, then good sign, everything is okay. Shalom lecha, it's all in peace. By the life of God, everything is okay, no problem. But if I say, and he's changed the word from na to elem, right? Elem, almost in the sense of elem means I don't know. Hidden, yeah, because he in his heart of hearts he doesn't want to come out with this. So he's even used a word which suggests his as you say in Ivrit, his matzav ruach. His matzav ruach is that he doesn't want to contemplate this second scenario. So he doesn't even call the lad a lad anymore. He uses a word which means a lad, but can also have another meaning. Ele, right? Something hidden. And he says, if you hear the instruction that it's gone beyond you, lech, then you need to get up and run. Kishilacha Hashem, because a message from God that you've got, that you have to leave. Some say that the whole idea was he would shoot the arrow and there'll be a wind. And the wind would carry the arrow as a sign from Hashem. These were very godly people. They would rely on the wind, either dropping the arrow short, a good sign, or making the arrow go beyond David, which was the bad sign that David has got to run away for his life. That's another explanation, which I like very much. The idea is it's all biyat Hashem. You see here, Chai Hashem, it's all by the life of God, by the hand of God. Now, Kafbet. This is a message from God. Pasuk Kaf Gimel. This matter which we've spoken, this is a sign that God is between us forever. Wow. It's so beautiful. And again, if you look into Rabbi, he expands on this. There's many midrashim about the discussion that went on between them. These are really not your run-of-the-mill guys. These are very, very special people. They understand each other and they talk the language which they both understand. Now, how's this going to play out? It's a great story. Make a great movie, right? I don't know if I'm sure they've done it. Although this story I don't think features in the movie. They like David and Goliath in the movies. So David goes and hides. Rosh Chodesh is upon them. And the king sits down to break bread. Wonderful. He's sitting in his chair, El Moshav Akir by the wall. And Yonatan is there, and Avner, the cousin of Shaul, is sitting. He's the head of the army. And there's an empty chair. And whose chair is it? It's the place occupied normally by David. So of course Shaul is very observant, and he notices it. For those who argue that Shaul was going through a situation of madness, these are all proofs that he clearly was not mad. He certainly was focused on many things. Depression, I think, is much more a realistic description of what's happening to him. But listen to this. Unbelievable story. V'lo diber Shaul mu'ma. On the first day, Shaul said nothing. David's not here. Okay, it happens. Vayomahu, and he gave David the benefit of the doubt. Ki amar mikrahu bilti tahohu ki lo taho. He said David is impure. Right? He's had some sort of a situation which made him tameh, and this again is mind-blowing. They were of a standard where they would eat their food in a situation of purity. We know that today the whole question of mikveh is much more relevant for the ladies than it is for the men. The men go and dunk maybe once a year, Erev Yom Kippur, whatever. In those days, they'd be dunking the whole time. And Hasidic Jews do this every day if they can, but the general consensus that men don't do it today. But in those days, they would not eat meals without becoming tahor. It's quite extraordinary. It's called Altarat HaKodesh. They would eat with the purity of holiness. Extraordinary standard that they kept. And this was, for Shaul, this was obvious. That's why David didn't turn up, because he's not tahor. He's got to go to the mikveh. So let's see what happens tomorrow. Shaul is holding back. Pasuk Kav Zayin. Vayihi b'mocharat hachodesh hasheni. Day number 2. Vayipoket mokum David. David hasn't come for the second time. Vayomer Shaul Yonatan bano madua. Madua, as I always point out, is a very strong word. Right? If you say lama is with one hand, madua is with both hands. You go madua, right? Which you may want to try sometimes at a government office. When they say no, you go madua, and see what happens. You know, you may get a response. To say lama, forget it. They won't want to know. It's just one of those words in Hebrew. Even today, it's got a powerful sort of boost. Madua lo ba ben Yishai gam t'mol gam hayom al alechem. What's going on with Ben Yishai? You can see that this is not good because he's not even calling him by his first name. The son of Yishai didn't turn up yesterday. He didn't come today. The bread is here. What's going on? Vayan Yonatan et Shaul. Now the plan goes into action because he's got to give an excuse. And Yonatan is saying, Nishal David me'imodi ad Beit Lechem. David asked me if he could go to Beit Lechem. Now you'll say to me, why didn't he ask the king? The answer is obvious, because the king had already thrown a couple of spears at him, and David was not going to try it again. But at least he felt that Yonatan, if Yonatan gave him permission to go to Beit Lechem, it was as if the king had given him permission, and that's the story over here. So, Vayomer Shalcheni na, he said, this is what David asked, send me. We've got a family get together in the city of Beit Lechem where I live. And even my brother sent me a message. And again, we know that the relationship between the brothers is not exactly cordial, to put it mildly, but this is the story that Yonatan is spinning here. I want to go and see my brothers, says David in the story that Yonatan is telling his father. Al Kain Loba Al Shulchan HaMelech, so he didn't turn up. 2 days, he's in Beit Lechem. At this point, Shaul shows his real feelings. Vayecha af Shaul b'Yonatan. He's angry not now at David as much as he is at Yonatan. Yonatan, you become his lackey, you become his slave. You're making excuses for your friend. Vayomelo ben na'avata mardut. You become like a rebellious a maidservant. In other words, and the rabbis make a whole deal about this expression because Shaul was saying to him, what will happen? And Shaul knows that David will probably be the next king, and Yonatan won't be, and people are going to look at Yonatan thinking that you know he had the reputation of being the son of the king, and he may not be the son of the king. He may be the son of a woman who was rebellious. Maybe it's a chance for some conspiracy theories going on over there, that maybe Shaul had children, out of marriage, and all of these rumors will start because you, Yonatan, are protecting David. You shouldn't do it. Hello, Yodati kibocheata ben Shai. I know you're choosing Ben Yishai levashtecha for your shame, or leboshet evati mecha, and the shame of your mother. Basically, you're putting the whole family to shame of what you're doing here. Wow, this is intense. And in fact, so interesting because the children of Shaul, the son is called Ishboshet. He eventually becomes a man of embarrassment. So the rabbis have got a nice explanation for that. But the word Boshet becomes very, very powerful in the family. You have Mufi Boshet, the grandson of Shaul, and you have Ishboshet, the son of Shaul, who we haven't heard of till we hear about him in the beginning of the next book of Shmuel Bet. Unbelievable. So these words come back to haunt him, right? Boshet. But listen to what happens. Kafala. Lamadar, excuse me. As long as David is alive, Ben Yishai, your kingdom is not going to be established because he is a rival. Bring him to me, ki ben mavet, I will put him to death. In other words, I have treated him, I've pasken, I've decided he is a rebel against the king. He deserves to die. It's unbelievable. Pasuk lamed bet, vayan Yonatan et Shaul aviv. Yonatan answers his father, and this was incredibly brave. Vayomer elav lama yumat, my son. What did he do? Why should he put to death? You're right. He's standing up to the king. Try it. I mean, I don't know how Charles would react nowadays, but if you tried this with Henry VIII, not a good idea. He'd probably have your head off in about 2 seconds. Standing up to the king. Just imagine the kach, and it's his father, which even makes it worse because he's got to say something here which grieves him so much to say. And Shaul's reaction is not even to answer him, but to take the spear. He took the spear to throw it at him, right? And Yonatan knows what's coming. This was it. Absolute confirmation that as far as Shaul is concerned, David is dead. Yonatan got up. You can imagine the scene is so dramatic, and he pushes the table away, and all the kalim go flying off. Maybe I'm embellishing it a little bit, but whatever. The fact is, this is a very dramatic scene. And what happens at this point? Yonatan refuses to eat. Ki netzav el David. He was so sad now. Netzav atzuv. He was so upset. Ki chlimo aviv, the way his father had spoken about David and put him to shame. It is unbelievable. this story, it eats you up. Pasuk Lamed Hey, Vayihi baboker, vayetz Yonatan hasadeh lamoin. David, so the next morning, the third day, and Yonatan goes out into the field when they agreed, V'na'kotonimon, he's got this little lad with him. Vayomer lanaro, roots, the young man, run. Mitzana tachitzim asher anochi morah, I'm going to shoot the arrows, go and find them. So the lad ran, V'hu yara chetzi labiro, and he shot the arrows over the boy's head in the distance. And of course, Vayavo anad makom hachetzi asher yara Yonatan, he came to the place where the arrow landed. Vayikra Yonatan achrei anav vayomer halo hachetzi mimcha v'hala. The sisma was repeated. The password, the message that the arrow has gone beyond that point where he knew David was hiding. And of course, David realized, this is it. I've got to get up and run away. Vayikra Yonatan achrei hana. Yonatan calls to the lad, Mahera chusha al ta'amod, go quickly, right? Because Yonatan knows that David has got to get out of there pretty fast. Vayilaked na Yonatan et achitzi, picked up the arrow. Vayavol Adonai, brought it back. Va'nar lo yodam, the lad doesn't know what's going on. You know, they're shooting arrows. I'm going to collect them. End of the story. But Yonatan v'David yodu et hadavar, but Jonathan and David both knew what was going on. Vayitain Yonatan et kelav. Yonatan puts his vessels al anab. In other words, everything he was carrying, the lad took them. Ashelo. Vayomelo lech, go take them back to the palace. I have to stay here for a few minutes, and I'll be back soon. Tell my father I'm on the way home. Hanarba, the lad got back to the palace. But David kam me'etzel hanegeh. David got up in the direction of the south. In other words, he's preparing to run away. He bows down on the ground 3 times because he realizes that Yonatan, this must be the hardest thing for Yonatan to do, is to have to come to terms with this situation. And 3 times, I guess, corresponding to the 3 arrows, whichever way you want to understand it. Vayishku ish et re'ehu, and they kissed each other because this was a sign of the taking leave from each other. Vayivku, and I always handed out the tissues at this point in the class because they, it's so emotional and it's so moving that these men who are, David is a man of war, for goodness sake. He's got a sword in his right hand and he's on a horse and, he hasn't got a hat on the back of his head. I can show you that. And the reality is that David is crying and he's certainly not wearing a kapota, although I guess I once saw a Beis Yaakov poster of the Jews coming out of Egypt, and the men were wearing fur hats and the women were wearing shaykhs. It's unbelievable. And this was in a Beis Yaakov kindergarten somewhere in Ramot, I think it was at the time. Truly remarkable that people would even think like that. But anyway, that's a whole discussion for another time. So listen to this. And they cried. They both just couldn't stop crying until David even cried more. David was higdil, even more than Yonatan, right? This is it's unbelievable. Yonatan leDavid lech l'shalom, and Yonatan finally had to say to David, "Go in peace." Asher nishbanu shenenu anachnu, that we've both made an oath b'shem Hashem le'imor, in the name of God, saying, "Hashem yiyeh beini u'beinecha," may God be between you and me, u'bein zari u'bein zarach ad olam, forever and ever, between our families forever. It's so moving, it's so overwhelming, this story, the way that they and Yonatan till the end, he doesn't want to put the onus on his father until he realizes that's it, there's no turning back. I just wanted to share with you just one comment from Rabbi about why David put himself in this situation of going back to the palace. And just read 1 or 2 comments. But Bachra, what he does, he always refers you to Tehillim, because Tehillim reflects the soul of David, right? In the Tehillim, you'll very often find David referring to a story that we read in the Shmuel and Aleph or Shmuel Bet. And in the Tehillim, you get the sort of the parish. What is David feeling? And he says that the story here represents something which he finds in the Mesillat Yesharim, famous book of Musa by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who wrote 32 books, right, when he died at the age of 40. Unbelievable man. And the book Mesillat Yesharim is one of the most famous books which all the Bale Musa, sort of, the Musaniks go into this in big time, and they say there is a midah, there's an attribute which David is showing here is the attribute of Nikiyut. Nikiyut, he says, means to be literally clean, but we would say clean in the sense of clearing things up. David does not want to leave Yonatan until the whole situation has been absolutely clarified 100%. If David ran away and Yonatan wasn't sure, and Yonatan will then hear from his father all the arguments against David, it could be that Yonatan will change his mind, and instead of being David's best friend, he will become David's enemy. Because in the end of the day, his father is convinced David is a rebel against the state. And therefore, by definition, the law is that the rebel has been put to death. So this is something where David needs to clarify to Yonatan the situation. And the way Rabbi puts it, he says that David literally lives the pasuk we say when we put away the Torah, not on Shabbat, but during the week. He says, Mi yaleh bar Hashem, mi yakum bimkom kodsho. Who can stand on the mountain of God? Neki kapayim ubar levav, a man with clean hands. David wants to be absolutely 100% upfront and transparent with Yonatan. And in order to do that, he is taking a phenomenal risk. He's going back to the palace, and he's going to reveal to Yonatan everything that happened to him from the moment that Shmuel anointed him till now. And we know that when Shmuel anointed him, the whole family was shocked. Remember, we spoke about that. And the reality was that David did nothing to pursue more of the potential kingship, which he knows is coming his way. He's done nothing. He's just been loyal to Shaul, and he's gone to battle, and he's killed the Plishtim and all the rest of it. But at this point, David wants to be upfront with Yonatan. And this, again, I'll just read one or 2 points that Rabbi says. David holech lefayes et Yonatan. At this point, David wants to appease Yonatan. Ima et harayon hazeh kibalnu. He says this is something which we learn from the rabbis about the character of David. Hein David mitkonen l'sapel Yonatan kol asher kara'u me'az haritzu min hatzon el Shmuel. He wants now to tell Yonatan everything that happened to him from the moment that Shmuel anointed him and he left the flock. Vayimshach oto b'kerev echam. David has not done anything to further his aspirations to become a king. David is so embarrassed about this because he realizes that in the end of the day, Shaul, and he loves Shaul. He's for goodness sake, Shaul is his father-in-law. So the reality is that there is a tremendous sense of wanting to come clean. Nikiyut, he calls it Nikiyut. And he says that a kriya zod rotzeh David likro keneged kol yirivav. As well as for Yonatan, David wants to send a message to all the enemies. Tzarav oivav, and he had plenty of people who were against him. Doeg, we're going to read about it, Mitzvah Hashem, in the next couple of chapters. A guy called Doeg, great Talmud Chacham, but an absolutely impossible person. I wonder how many people that defines in the world that we live in. Great scholar, but not really a nice person. I don't know. Maybe there are too many. The learning should have an effect on the people. I'm getting a little bit too political here. Anyway, Tzarava Oivav Asher Tsaru Lo B'Doro Dorot Shel Acharav. All the people are going to come against David. He wants to send a message. Asher Tamnu Lo Shacham Rishtam Chinam Chafru LeNafshi. They are digging against the soul of David. V'Heim LeYaminu Lo. They won't believe David when he says, I'm innocent. I've got nothing to hide. You're accusing me of things which are just not. This doesn't make sense, says David. I don't understand. And there are such beautiful psukim from Tehillim. The bottom line, which he says here, which again I just as I keep saying, when you go into the character of David, you come away so elevated. You come away so inspired. This was a man who really, number one, when he's wrong, he admits it. He says chatati. He says it a number of times. And the rabbis say that's the difference between David and Shaul. Shaul did not admit it openly that he did something wrong with Amalek. And as a result, he lost the kingship. David always admitted his faults when it was brought to his attention. Natan says, David, what did you do with Bathsheba? Crazy story, which we'll get to eventually. And David says, yeah, you're right. You've now explained it to me. Chatati. He does the Ashamnu immediately. Unbelievable. And here we've got another aspect of his character. He wants to be absolutely transparent. If I'm going to be your friend, I want you to know exactly what the real situation is, the truth, the whole truth, as we say, and nothing but the truth. And this is Rav Bachrach's explanation here why David was even prepared to put his life in danger. As I titled the paper I sent out to you, he's going into the lion's den. Right? This is Daniel going into the den. He's going back into the palace, but he needs to have that conversation with Jonathan because he needs Jonathan to recognize, to realize what's going on and how desperate the situation is. David is literally in a life and death circumstance, and you'll see only gets more difficult over the next couple of chapters. Eventually, he's in a position where he can kill the king, and he doesn't do it. The whole story with En-Gedi and beyond. It's all wonderful, wonderful stories which Mitzvah Hashem we will get to in the next couple of sessions. And in the meantime, what can I say? David and Jonathan, my brother-in-law, he should be well. His Hebrew name is Jonathan David. So I guess my father-in-law had that in mind, right? Bring them together at least in a character. Is he more like David or more like Jonathan? I hope he's a mix of both. I'm not going to say anything. He's a wonderful guy. He really is a special guy. I'll leave you to think about it. This idea of friendship, the idea of being upfront, of nikiyut, this the niki kapayim, that your hands should be clean. Wow, it's very, very special. We're learning about tzaddikim. We're learning about very, very important righteous individuals. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you.